Have you ever observed how, the more you attempt to justify yourself, the more your words get twisted by others? How battling for respect, truth, or justice only leaves you appearing desperate, while those truly at fault escape unscathed. But what if I revealed to you that the instant you cease justifying, cease pursuing, cease responding, karma begins its work on your behalf? It's akin to a snake sinking its fangs into its own tail. The harder it thrashes, the worse the injury grows, yet when it quits struggling, nature steps in and healing commences. Or picture an echo among the mountains. What you project outward eventually returns to you. That's the way karma operates. The falsehoods they sow, the damage they inflict, it all circles back to them eventually because while they're occupied with provoking, misleading, and manipulating, you face a decision. Tumble into their snare or withdraw and observe as karma pens the concluding chapter. And when you opt for quietness, that's when the burden of their deeds finally crashes down upon them. That's when their own force turns against them. So, when do you retreat and allow karma to manage what words could never achieve? Remain with me, for the final point will transform your entire outlook. Let's dive in. Number 1, when someone spreads lies about you. Let's discuss one of the most exasperating scenarios. When someone circulates falsehoods about you, it's enticing to retaliate, to restore your reputation, to ensure everyone grasps the truth. But here's the stark reality. Countering lies with defense often stirs up more turmoil. The more you respond, the more fuel you lend to the falsehood. The more you strive to clarify, the more folks begin doubting, even if they harbored no suspicions initially. Here's the reality. Certain people aren't concerned with what's genuine. They're fixated on the response. The individual fabricating tales about you isn't seeking truth. They're craving dominance. They want you shaken. They want you upset. They want you entangled in a struggle where each step you take becomes evidence that the lie carries substance. And if you participate, you're stepping into their arena. This is where Stoic insight emerges. Marcus Aurelius once declared, "If it isn't right, don't do it. If it isn't true, don't speak it." This is the benchmark you must uphold for yourself. Others might deceive, others might lie, but their behaviors don't shape you. Your reaction does. Rather than squandering your energy refuting untruths, permit time and truth to unveil everything, because here's what people overlook. Lies possess an expiration, whereas truth endures forever. Let me recount a tale. A man I'm acquainted with, let's name him James, faced an accusation at work for something he never committed. Whispers circulated, rumors multiplied, some colleagues pulled away. His initial urge? To approach everyone, explaining, convincing them of his innocence. But instead, he embraced silence. He continued his tasks, remained professional, and let his conduct speak. Weeks passed, and the truth emerged. The rumor monger had a track record of deceit. James didn't need to validate anything. The truth disclosed itself, and since he avoided the chaos, his standing held firm. So how do you navigate this? First, rely on the long haul. Lies might travel fast, but truth outlasts them. Second, center on your honor. If you're certain of your identity, the views of those swayed by lies don't count. And finally, let karma take its course. Those who slander others ultimately betray themselves through their own habits. You don't need to pursue them. Life will sort it out. Ultimately, your silence isn't frailty, it's mastery. When someone fabricates about you, don't descend to their plane. Stay steady, stay composed, and recall, truth invariably surfaces, and when it does, your dignity will still stand strong. Number 2, when someone shatters your trust. Let's explore one of life's toughest teachings, coping with betrayal. Be it a friend who abandons you, a partner who violates your confidence, or someone you trusted who disappoints you. Betrayal cuts deeply in a way little else can. The first impulse? Confrontation. You yearn to demand explanations, pursue an apology, or force them to see the harm they've wrought. But here's the reality. Words won't alter a betrayer's essence. If someone could betray you once, odds are they've rationalized it in their head. They've persuaded themselves their deeds were justified, excusable, or even your doing. No degree of logic will shift that. If you attempt to elucidate, they'll distort your statements. If you aim to guilt them, they'll somehow cast you as the antagonist. That's why departing in silence delivers the strongest statement. This is where Stoic insight shines. Seneca once remarked, "A gem can't gleam without friction, nor a man mature without trials." Put differently, betrayal wounds, but it's also a challenge. It compels you to evolve, to fortify your limits, and to discern who genuinely merits a spot in your world. The ache you endure isn't mere torment. It's a teaching, a lesson in self-worth, in separation, and in releasing those never destined to remain. Let me narrate a story. A woman I know, let's call her Sarah, had a best friend for over a decade. They exchanged everything: secrets, hardships, triumphs. But one day, Sarah discovered this friend had been gossiping behind her back, divulging private talks, and even undermining her prospects. Initially, she was livid. She wanted to face her, to make her recognize her wrongdoing. But instead, she chose quietness. She didn't dispute. She didn't pursue vengeance. She just walked away. No clarifications, no further chances. And guess what transpired? The friend sensed the silence. She anticipated a clash, a theatrical outburst, but instead, she received apathy, and that silence. It resonated loudly. So how do you address betrayal? First, acknowledge that some individuals will never match your expectations of them. The pain stems from anticipation. Release it. Second, don't expend your words detailing their misdeeds to them. They're aware, even if they won't confess it. And finally, depart with poise. Your silence isn't weakness, it's potency. Ultimately, true strength lies in detachment. A betrayer feeds on reactions, on remorse, on extra opportunities. Don't grant them that. Let your silence affirm that you weren't the one who lost. You were the one they never should have crossed to begin with. Number 3, when someone hurls insults at you, let's address something we all encounter eventually. Insults. Be it a sly jab, a veiled slight, or a blatant assault, insults are crafted for one purpose: to rile you up. The second you retort, whether by arguing, justifying yourself, or displaying anger, you've handed the insulter precisely what they sought: sway over your feelings. Here's the reality. Reacting to insults only empowers them. When someone insults you, they're angling for a response. They want you perturbed. They want to know they've pierced your armor. But when you decline to engage, when you stay composed, unshaken, and detached, that's when you triumph, because nothing vexes an insulter more than being disregarded. This is where Stoic insight enters. Marcus Aurelius once stated, "The finest retribution is to not resemble your foe." Reflect on that. The instant you sink to their tier, you've already forfeited. If they're petty, harsh, or rude, why offer them the gratification of watching you descend to their contest? Instead, choose the loftier route, one of quietness, restraint, and dignity. Let me tell a tale. A guy I know, let's call him David, attended a work gathering when a coworker, envious of his recent advancement, opted to jab at him publicly. Wow, guess they're giving promotions to anyone nowadays. The room hushed, awaiting David's comeback. But instead, David merely smiled, locked eyes, and offered nothing. Just silence, no fury, no rebuttal. And guess what occurred? The coworker grew uneasy. He'd expected a retort, perhaps a spat, but instead, he stood there, laid bare, while David retained his authority. So how do you manage insults? First, realize that insults reflect more on the one dishing them out than on you. People who demean others typically project their own flaws. Second, grasp that your silence is your might. By not responding, you demonstrate their words lack weight in your realm. And finally, bear yourself with assurance. When you reply with serene indifference, the insulter's left impotent. Ultimately, you can't dictate what others say, but you can govern how you react, and sometimes the mightiest reaction is none at all, because silence. That's a supreme proof that their words don't define you. You do. If you found this meaningful, tap like and subscribe for more potent insights. Number 4, when they act the victim. Let's tackle one of the most maddening and cunning behaviors, those who pose as victims. You recognize them. They skew the narrative, conveniently omit their own actions, and frame themselves as the wrong party. What really happened doesn't matter to them. What counts is how they can garner pity, deflect fault, and make others view you as the culprit. And the more you try to justify yourself, the more you resemble the villain. Here's the reality. Some folks don't seek resolution. They crave attention. They don't value honesty. They don't value fairness. Their aim isn't to mend the situation, it's to steer the story. And if you bite, if you debate, clarify, or attempt to prove your stance, you're stepping right into their trap. This is where Stoic insight applies. Epictetus once noted, "To grumble is always fruitless and never fitting," and that suits this perfectly. When someone plays the victim, they're not after solutions. They're after an audience. Let karma unmask their deceit because the truth, it always emerges. Perhaps not today, perhaps not tomorrow, but in time, people spot trends. They'll see how this person perpetually casts themselves as the victim in every case. And that's when the facade crumbles. Let me share an account. A woman I know, let's call her Rachel, had a coworker who incessantly played the victim. Whenever challenged on something, she'd twist the scenario and say things like, "I can't believe you'd blame me for that. I'd never harm anyone." She ensured tears flowed before the right crowd, painting Rachel as the aggressor. At first, Rachel tried to defend herself. She laid out facts, presented evidence, even sought a rational dialogue. But the harder she tried, the worse it became. The coworker reveled in the drama, turning every reply into further proof she was under attack. So Rachel switched tactics. She fell silent. No more defending, no more reacting. She simply let time disclose the truth, and it did. Over time, others began noticing identical patterns. The coworker overplayed the victim card, and people ceased trusting her. The same ploys that once succeeded grew transparent, and her credibility eventually collapsed. So how do you deal with someone who plays the victim? First, don't dispute. The more you strive to validate yourself, the more you bolster their tale. Second, remain calm and aloof. Let their own conduct expose them. And finally, trust karma. Those who persistently manipulate and distort truth will always unveil themselves eventually. Ultimately, silence is your strength. Let them speak. Let them weave their version. Let them play their game because, in the end, the truth needs no defense from you. Time will handle that. Number 5, when they overlook your worth. Let's examine one of life's most painful yet vital lessons, being underappreciated. Whether in relationships, friendships, or even at work, there arrives a point when you realize someone fails to see your value. You give, you uplift, you show up, but rather than gratitude, you receive indifference. Rather than respect, you're taken for granted. Any instinctive urge to vie for their acknowledgement, to prove your merit. But here's the reality. Pleading for recognition diminishes your worth. The more you pursue, the less they esteem you. People don't cherish what's ever present. They don't prize what they think they'll never lose. And that's why silence becomes your greatest tool. When you halt proving, halt chasing, and halt trying to make them perceive your value, a shift occurs. Suddenly, they sense the void of what they assumed was guaranteed. Silence compels them to recognize what they've forfeited. This is where Stoic insight steps in. Seneca once said, "Time uncovers truth." And that's precisely what transpires when you depart with dignity. The truth reveals itself, not via words, not via arguments, but via absence. Those who genuinely valued you will notice. Those who didn't, they were never meant to linger. Let me recount a story. A man I know, let's call him Jake, was always the one exerting effort in his relationships. Be it with friends or colleagues, he was the one who checked in, who appeared, who made folks feel appreciated. But over time, he observed something. The effort flowed one way. If he didn't reach out, days, even weeks, passed without contact. If he didn't start, no one did. And that's when it struck him. He wasn't valued. He was convenient. So Jake chose differently. He stopped pursuing. No grand exits, no furious tirades, just silence. And guess what happened? Those who truly cared reached out. Those who saw him merely as an option, they faded, and that was his clarity. So how do you cope with being undervalued? First, cease explaining your worth. Your value doesn't lessen just because someone can't see it. Second, step back and watch. The right people won't require prompts to value you. And finally, let time work its course. When you withdraw in silence, you grant others the chance to realize what they've lost. Ultimately, you don't need to prove yourself to anyone. If someone can't discern your worth while you're present, let them feel your absence because, at times, the only way people learn to treasure you is when they no longer have you. If you follow this far, don't forget to drop a "thank God" in the comments and hit like if you enjoyed this. Your support matters greatly and spurs me to keep crafting more engaging content. I hope you draw inspiration from this and that we keep growing together. Thanks for your encouragement. Number 6. When they aim to provoke you. Let's explore one of the most potent forms of self-mastery. Not reacting when someone seeks to provoke you. There will always be those who relish conflict. They jab, they nudge, they toss out remarks just to burrow under your skin, and the moment you bite, be it with anger, frustration, or defense, you've handed them exactly what they desired: dominion over your emotions. Here's the reality. Those who thrive on discord aren't after resolution. They're after a reaction. They want you rattled, upset, or off balance. They feed off your emotional charge because it grants them a sense of control. But when you refuse to bite, when you remain steady, composed, and aloof, that's the ultimate power play. This is where Stoic insight emerges. Marcus Aurelius once proclaimed, "You hold sway over your mind, not external events." Grasp this, and you'll find fortitude. You can't dictate others' actions. You can't prevent folks from trying to stir you, but you can decide whether their efforts sway your peace. And when you master that, you become impervious. Let me tell a story. A guy I know, let's call him Adam, had a coworker who thrived on stirring trouble. Every meeting, every exchange, this coworker lobbed subtle digs, aiming to rile Adam up. At first, Adam would counter, argue, and attempt to explain, but eventually he saw something. No matter his words, it only worsened things. So one day he shifted tactics. The next time his coworker tossed a barb, Adam just smiled, offered a calm nod, and carried on like it was nothing. And guess what? The coworker despised it. He persisted, but without the reaction he craved, he soon lost steam. So how do you handle those who provoke? First, spot their ploy. If someone keeps trying to irk you, it's no fluke, it's deliberate. Second, stay steady and detached. Your silence and indifference will irk them more than any clash ever could. And finally, recall that real strength isn't in reacting. It's in commanding your own mind. Ultimately, the mightiest figure in the room isn't the loudest shouter. It's the one who won't let anyone else's negativity sway them. When you overlook those itching to provoke, you rob them of the gratification they seek, and that, right there, is true might. Number 7. When they lament losing you. Let's discuss one of life's most potent lessons: stepping away and letting someone bear the consequences of their choices. When someone mistreats you, undervalues you, or fails to cherish you, there comes a time when they see what they've squandered, but by then, it's too late. Here's the reality. If someone genuinely prized you, they wouldn't have positioned themselves to lose you to begin with. People don't always see your value when you're there, when you're accessible, when your presence feels constant, but the moment you're absent, the silence grows deafening. That's when regret creeps in. That's when they replay every misstep, every chance they could have acted better. And this is why silence is your finest reply. You don't need to dispute, clarify, or remind them of what they forfeited. Let them wrestle with the fallout. Let them feel the void of what they once held but didn't treasure, because when you truly depart, with no words, no retries, no perhaps later vibes, your absence speaks volumes. This is where Stoic insight shines. Epictetus once said, "No man is free who isn't master of himself." That means true power isn't in dominating others. It's in dominating yourself. It's about the resolve to walk away from those who didn't prize you and the wisdom to never glance back, because real strength isn't in pursuit. It's in knowing when to cease offering your energy to those who never earned it. Let me share a tale. A woman I know, let's call her Olivia, was in a long-term bond where she constantly felt overlooked. She gave all, her time, her affection, her support. But her partner, he assumed it was a given. He figured she'd always stay until one day she didn't. Olivia didn't scream, didn't plead, didn't warn. She just left. No grand departure, no lengthy explanations, just silence. At first, her partner thought it a bluff, but then weeks stretched into months, and he realized she was truly gone. By the time he contacted her, brimming with remorse and apologies, Olivia had moved forward, and that's when he truly felt the loss. So how do you manage someone who regrets losing you? First, don't offer an easy return. If they only value you post-departure, they never truly cherished you. Second, don't justify your absence. Let them ponder. And finally, recall that real self-respect is knowing when to leave and staying gone. Ultimately, the greatest lesson you can impart is that once you're gone, you're gone. If someone rues losing you, let them. Their regret isn't your duty. Their lesson isn't your load. Step away, stay quiet, and let karma finish the rest. If you found this meaningful, tap like and subscribe for more potent insights.